everyone, it's Jessica. Welcome back to another Makers with Heart video collaboration. This month we are all using stencils, and I am going to be using this stencil pack here. It is the card front stencil pack number 2. Yesterday, Lori used that top one, which has the mandala on it, which is really pretty. And today for my projects, I'm going to be using the other 2 that are part of that stencil pack. Now, first I'm going to be playing with those leaves, and I've decided to use some of the texture paste that you can get from Close to My Heart. And this is just the opaque matte texture paste. And it does dry pretty quickly, so I like to keep my lid screwed tightly on. And I also use a little bit of saran wrap over it. And then I'm going to be playing with my Distress Oxide. So this is Mowed Lawn, and I'm just going to squish it down and leave a little bit of color on my all-purpose mat. And then using a palette knife, scoop some of that really fun texture paste out. It is just like frosting, is really the consistency of it. And make sure to put that lid back on because, like I said, it does dry very quickly. And then I'm going to just smush it into that Mowed Lawn color that I have on my mat and then mix it around. Like I said, it really does remind me a lot of frosting. And so if you just play with it a little bit, it will take up all of that color from the Distress Oxide ink and mix it into the white of the texture paste. And just keep doing that until you have an even color and no streaks of green. All right, now this particular stencil does have a bunch of up and down lines that are kind of delicate. And so I found that it was best to work in up and down motions with my palette knife, just so that I didn't accidentally get any of that texture paste underneath my pencil or my stencil where I didn't want it. And I'm mostly going to be focusing my efforts on the top half of this card, this piece of White Daisy cardstock, and I don't want to go all the way to the edges. So almost like a bit of a big circle across the top half of the card, if you will. It doesn't have to be exact. I'm fine with it looking very organic and messy, but I'm just, like I said, scraping my palette knife in up and down strokes so that way I can work with the motion of the stencil. I hope that makes sense. But really, I'm just kind of pushing it down here, and then you can scrape some of that back up with your palette knife and just keep moving it on down your piece of cardstock until you've gotten as much covered as you want to cover or until you are out of texture paste. Now, the important thing, like I said, because this does dry so quickly, is to make sure that once you are done putting it onto your paper, that you clean everything up immediately so that it doesn't dry on there. And I'm just about done getting it on here. I think I'm happy with the way this is. Like I said, I wanted to get close to the edge, but I didn't want to go all the way up to the edge. And I am going to be covering that bottom portion of that card front, so it didn't really matter where I stopped down there. So I'm going to take a few minutes off camera to go clean this up. And first I'm going to pull off my stencil here for the big reveal. That moment is always so fun. And just kind of pull that carefully so I don't rip it. There. Isn't that just gorgeous? It will dry fairly quickly. But I will just set it aside for a little bit, and then there you can see it's dry. And I ran my stencil through the water in the sink so that it was cleaned off. All right, now this is a piece of wild berry cardstock, and I have just edge distressed it with my ink pad. And that piece is cut to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And then I have another piece of wild berry cardstock cut to 1 3/4 by 4 inches. And I'm using the lighter side of wild berry for that one. Now this is some nectarine, also cut to 1 3/4 by 4 inches. And I'm going to tear about 1/4 inch off of the top there. And I'm going to pull that tear towards me so that I can reveal that white core. And then I'm just layering these 2 pieces here. So this one will go across the bottom of where that stenciling has ended, and then that other piece of wild berry is going to butt up to the bottom of that piece of White Daisy. Now I should mention I did cut my White Daisy piece of cardstock down just by 1/4 inch from a card front, so it is 4 by 5 1/4. And then I'm going to layer these. And let's see, put that one down there. I guess this nectarine piece probably could have even been smaller because you really have only about, I don't know, maybe 1/4 to 1/2 inch showing above that wild berry piece, but it was just easier to cut them both to the same dimension and then have them sitting there ready for my project. And then later I will trim off some of that excess where I didn't quite put it on very well. All right, now this is a piece of Wildberry Shimmer trim, and Shimmer trim is about 3/8 of an inch in width, and I wanted this to be a little bit smaller. So I just cut myself a strip that was a little bit longer than 4 inches, and I taped it to my paper trimmer. And then I slid it through with the blade so that I could cut it in half. And so I found that that was a little bit easier than trying to just cut it in half with my scissors and, hope that it ended up being a straight cut. So that worked out fine. So I'm going to put that across the very top of that Wildberry piece. Now the next step is to take some of these thin cuts. These are from the Layered Flowers thin cuts that I've been playing a lot with lately, and they're a lot of fun. And I've just cut the one top flower in Nectarine, and then the bottom flower is the lighter side of Canary. And I'm just layering those up on there with a little bit of glue, and that's going to be over on the side of our card. And then I have grabbed the word hello, and this is actually from that, oh gosh, I'm going to forget the name of it, the fish stamp set that was part of the Slimline celebration recently. And there's a hello on there, so I've just stamped that hello from that stamp set onto a hexagon. And then all of this is going to get centered, matted, if you will, onto that piece of Wildberry, which, like I said, that's the dark side. And then the little strip at the bottom is the lighter side of Wildberry. And then I almost forgot, I was putting some tape adhesive on the back of my hexagon, and then I remembered, you know what, I should probably use some liquid glue just because that texture paste does have a lot of dimension to it, and I thought that that hexagon would adhere better to the card front if it had that glue to kind of soak into the cracks or like the little channels, if you will, of the texture paste underneath. And so I would recommend using some liquid glue and not just tape adhesive over top of that texture paste. So I'm just giving it a good press to make sure that it's down there. And then I've added some 3D foam tape to the back of my layered flower here. And then I'm going to frame 2 of those petals around my hello sentiment and just kind of stick that off there. Later I will have to trim just the very edge of that one petal that is sticking off to the left so that I can fit my card into an envelope. All right, now using some glue dots and the Wildberry loose sequins, I am going to attach 2 sequins here next to my flower and my hello. And then this card just needs to be adhered to a card base, and it is done. So very fun. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the second card project that I'm going to do with the other stencil from card pack number 2. Now for this one, I am using a retired die. This is a heart, the stitched heart, and so you could do this with your Cricut, or if you have this or any kind of heart die that you have. Basically, you're just going to need a heart and a full stick sticky note. Actually, you'll need a couple of full stick sticky notes. So I'm going to run this through my Cuttlebug on that full stick sticky note, and we're going to want to save both pieces. So this outer frame here, save that because we're going to use it later, and then also the heart itself. And we're going to use both of those to create this next card. And I did find that because my plates were so full of lint that my sticky notes were not as sticky as I wanted them to be. They were like picking up all the lint from my plates. So that's something to think about if you're like me and you have some really dirty old plates. So I am, again, working with a 4 by 5 1/4 piece of white daisy cardstock. And I am putting that outline of what we had cut for the heart down, and I'm trying to make sure that my heart is centered as I can get it. And then I just tore a couple of pieces of extra sticky note so that I could protect more of that white space on my card front, just in case I got a little crazy and messy. All right, now this is the other stencil that is in that pack, and it has a really pretty floral pattern to it. And I'm just moving it around because there are lots of different looking flowers on there, and I'm just turning it until I like, the flowers that I can see and the way that they're revealed in that heart. And then I've just taped that stencil down to my all-purpose mat to hold it in place. And now I am going to be using my mini ink foam blending tool, which is always such a mouthful to say, and 3 different colors of Distress Oxide ink. So I'm going to start with Picked Raspberry, and I'm just going to put this around the top right side of my heart. And if you haven't played with Distress Oxides before, they are so fun to blend through a stencil. They go on very smoothly. And especially if you pick your colors wisely and they're colors that play well together, they really do blend together and make this just beautiful, seamless transition of color, you know, as you're moving from one to the other. So this time I'm coming in with Seedless Preserves, which is a really pretty purple color. And I am not only covering more of the heart, but I'm also going over a little bit of where I had that picked raspberry. And then the last color I'm going to use is Chipped Sapphire, which when it moves into that Seedless Preserves, it makes a really pretty different color of purple. So again, choose your colors wisely if you're blending, and then you can always, like you can see here, I'm coming back over and you can add back in with a different color and just layer those colors until you like the way that it looks. And it's a little hard to tell here because I'm working on such a small space and I have so many yellow sticky notes, but when you pull it off and you have that big reveal, it's really pretty to see. Now, I always get inky fingers when I am playing with my Distress Oxide inks, and so I'm trying to be very mindful of that so that as I'm pulling off those sticky notes, I'm not going to accidentally stick, you know, a dirty finger down onto my card front and like create a smudge or a mistake of some sort. So it ended up working out okay, but like I said, I was just being mindful of it. These do take a little while to dry, and I didn't really wait for them to dry, so I was just trying to be careful. And let's see, hold that down there. And so this heart by itself looks really pretty, but it doesn't stand out very well because there's no outline to it. So now I'm going to take that other sticky note piece that we had and I'm going to put it over top of what we just created. And so now I have protected that stenciled part, and I'm going to use my foam head that has the Seedless Preserves color on it, and I'm not even re-inking it because I don't want it to be very dark. I'm just going to very lightly go around that sticky note and keep the heart shape as much as I can, and create a halo effect of color, if you will. So that way we have that outline around the stenciled part of the heart, and it just makes it pop so much more, which you'll see right in a second when we pull off that mask. And so again, being mindful of fingerprint smudges, just going to very carefully pull that off. And like I said there, now you can see we've created the outline for that stenciled part to really pop. Okay. And so just a few last little touches for this card and it will be done. Now this is the January stamp of the month, which is adorable and I can't wait to play with it some more. It has very much a baby feel to me, but this one sentiment on here is really something that you could work for a lot of things. It says, "You make me smile." So I've just stamped that in intense black ink underneath my heart. And then to bring in a little bit more of that black color, I've grabbed a black Sharpie. My journaling pen is starting to dry out, so I just had to grab a Sharpie instead. And I'm going to make some doodle lines around the outside of my card here. And I love the look of doodle lines. I kind of avoided them for a long time because I was like, there's no way I can make these lines straight if I'm just like freehanding it around, you know, the corner or the outside of my project. And then I realized one day, like, Jessica, that's the whole point, is they're not supposed to be straight. It's okay if they're a little bit wobbly and wonky. That's the idea. And so if that kind of scares you, I know it did for me for a long time, just go for it. It's okay if they're not straight. It looks good anyway. That's the way it's supposed to be. Now, after going around once, I thought it needs a little bit more presence. And so I just did it a second time and I made sure to let my pen kind of crisscross from side to side with the first line that I had made. And so that way I wasn't just going directly over the same line, but I was really creating the look of two wobbly lines right next to each other. So finish that part off. Okay, and this card is almost done. The last part is just to mat it on a piece of black cardstock. And I am trying to be careful here, again, still being mindful of my inky fingers and whatnot. I'm just gonna mat that later because I did edge distress that in some black ink. All right, guys, that's it for me. I hope you have enjoyed all the other ladies. Make sure to check them out. Their links are down below. And tomorrow is Kim with her final stencil. Happy crafting.